What were your takeaways after watching the film of Malik Washington versus what you thought of him coming in?
I would agree. I would definitely agree. He plays with a lot of poise. I mean, I saw that in the film. I saw his ability also to be able to change the play and how much confidence they had in him doing that. Um, so yeah, I definitely came away pretty impressed. I mean, he was able to complete some passes, make some big time throws, scramble in some situations needed to get out of the pocket. So, um, I think that Nebraska has been fortunate, right, to be able to play against some good quarterbacks, and that's good for the experience of not only the secondary, the linebackers, but also the D line. How good different guys work throughout the pocket. So he was definitely a challenge for him. I know Butler said he would like to bring more pressure. That was kind of my feeling coming out of it. I think they respected the receiving core, quite a bit, and probably maybe even Malik Washington's ability to get the ball to him. So he's definitely probably top three quarterbacks I'd say from the PR4 school that we face. And I thought he did really well. So he'll be a guy to look out for. I hate hearing everyone keep saying he's not going to be at Maryland next year. Like it's the same people that complain about college football and where it's going, but then say stuff like that. That's the stuff that kind of irritates you about kind of the thing around him. But I hope he stays in Maryland. I hope he stays locked in with Loxley and Pep Hamilton. Two guys that obviously know how to run offenses and develop quarterbacks. So I hope they get the opportunity to develop them and they continue to do well.
From one quarterback to the other, talking about Dylan Raiola and his kind of comeback from the 3 interceptions, 2 of them being really bad interceptions. What did you make out of his poise to come back and have that game-winning drive for Nebraska after having those interceptions?
I mean, I think we saw who he really was, in that last drive. Someone who's poised, has command of offense, can lead those type of drive. I mean, he's been doing that all year. We've seen the stat floating around, of his last drive versus P14. And he's been exceptionally well, done exceptionally well. So I think that was the version of him we all want to see and want to continue to see more and elevate. But I think those interceptions, obviously, two of them not as clean of a look, whether it be the receivers, what they were supposed to do, or what his read was, definitely did look good. It was good to see that, they stuck with him, right? And obviously, not only the coaches sticking with him, but the players wanting Raiola to still be out there and be their guy. Um, you kind of can see that sometimes with teams don't have a good culture. Backup does well the first 3 games and some garbage time, things start to get shaky, and now you get the players kind of talking over to the backup quarterback, hey, be ready. You're talking about the come up type of thing.
Mm.
But I think Raiola has a good firm grasp of the leadership role on this team, and he's their guy. So to see him make those throws, he's been doing it in late game all year, but to see him make those throws after that performance he gave earlier on is definitely something that's should be celebrated, but also obviously won't be in that situation again.
Michael, you've been in a lot of locker rooms, obviously, and played with some different quarterbacks. How impressive is it to you that not just in this game against Maryland, we saw it against Michigan State. If you look at Raiola's fourth quarter numbers across the course of the season, that's a time period where he really does step up. How, I guess, Nebraska has a very strange kind of combination in history of recent history with quarterbacks. So can you give some frame of reference for, I guess, how unusual that is for guys to be able to really elevate themselves, kind of more generally speaking, in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we're players, right, we've seen some element of this in practice. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, um, no, I'm not even gonna say it 'cause I don't even want to reference 1-5 for the Chiefs. But in general, the same thing, guys saw with Raiola when he first stepped on campus. Like you see kind of the poise they have, obviously the skill and athleticism and the throwing mechanics and all that stuff. But right, how they carry themselves just around the locker room and things like that. I think Trey Taylor kind of has that same kind of mentality where it's like guys will just want to follow him. And Raiola, those guys again, they've seen it. They've seen it in practice. They know it, right? So I think it's not anything a surprise to the players, right? Maybe to the fans, but the players and coaches, right? They've seen Raiola do spectacular stuff in practice. You know what I mean? And it's just putting it out on game and being consistent with that type of performance.
Mm. Michael, I wanted to get to the defense here for a second. I know that going into this, we didn't think that Maryland was going to run the ball very much or very successfully. Seemed like they had a little bit more of a commitment to it than anyone that I had talked to was expecting. As a defensive player or a defensive coach, how much can that kind of throw off your game plan if you're like, hey, this team just doesn't have any interest in running the football, which they had not shown at any point in the year, and then they come out and do try and establish that a little bit? Like, it looked like Nebraska was maybe not quite ready for them to try and run the football as much as they were.
I wouldn't say quite ready. I mean, I just don't think maybe they executed in those situations maybe as well as they like. Because I mean, Butler came out in this last press conference. I mean, same thing this week. Like, team not interested in running the ball. I mean, they're more 50-50 offensively run pass, but haven't been efficient around the football. And so what do you expect them to do? They're going to run the football, right? So I think they're well aware that right now that's the point of emphasis for a lot of offenses coming into the game against them. So I don't want to necessarily always say people aren't prepared or don't say that, they maybe weren't ready for it. I'd say I'd rather put on they didn't execute, right? Even on the long run, like they're gapped out, they send the pressure, you're sending five guys. You just need your defense tackle to stay in the B gap and force the ball back to Savers in the A gap. I think it's just things like that where more it's just they got to execute better and do their job, and maybe it's more understanding the why, right? The big picture, right? Why do we need you to stay, hold a point in that B gap and force the ball back inside in this situation, right? Instead of trying to make a play cross face or, just things like that. So I put it more to like they just got to execute better. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. They get enough practice hours out of the week. I'm sure they, where all their runs. But I think they just got to execute.
Michael, we DB and I were talking yesterday about particularly the first touchdown run for Maryland, where McCullough kind of gets vertical, probably a little bit too much, creates that gap right off of it between guard and tackle for the running back for Maryland, and we're kind of getting into some of the more like complexities about that, right? Because I looked at it and I go, it looks like Shavers maybe got caught up in the wash inside a little bit. And DB goes, yeah, but he made if McCullough can stay a little bit closer into the line of scrimmage, that changes some things as well. When you're talking about the execution from Nebraska, was there one particular area? I know you brought up a defensive tackle in that last answer. Was there one particular area that stood out to you the most where there's like, hey, this is probably the thing that I would focus on cleaning up first and foremost?
I think they got to just get more. I think it's two things. I mean, holding a point is one thing, but also getting across guys' face and trying to make plays at 1 to 2 yards in the run game is important. You know, especially when you deal with a guy like Washington who has some run abilities, right? You get those 3rd and 5, and the thing now become a 50-50 game, right? Of him passing the ball or even them just handing the ball off, but more importantly, him being able to scramble. Um, so I think it's two things. I think being more explosive up front as far as getting extension, finding ways to get off blocks and shed those, or hold a point, but then also being able to shed and make plays at the line of scrimmage, right? And then I think the other thing too is just the yards after contact, and kind of like people look at it the break the tackle or stiff form, and he goes for another 5 to 7 yards. But as a coach, I look at it more so it's 1st and 10. We want to hold you to under 3 yards, right? That we hit you at 2 yards and you run through and get to 4. Okay, my game plan or how my philosophy, how I'm calling the next call is going to change based on us getting from. And this may sound like a very small thing to some people, but 2nd and 7 and 2nd and 6 are different on my sheet, right? So those things are the smaller details. I think they have to fix. Is like when we make contact with guys, the momentum has to stop, right? It's either the individual needs to drive their feet, right? Maybe the target needs to be at a different level as far as where they're making contact, or get more people to the ball. But I think those are kind of the 2 to 3 things I would look for, just bigger emphasis on, right? Making either neutral to positive tackles, which means we're taking guys back after we make contact, or they're stopped at the point we make contact, and just disengaging off blocks and holding the point, and trying to kind of increase that havoc rate, what I mean, making those negative plays. There's a lot of data out there that says you get a tackle for loss, on a drive, the offense has like, I think 40 some percent less chance to score a touchdown or something like that. Like it's those type of things, right? And being efficient with your run defense and stopping them on first down is important, which I thought they did a good job of, for the most part, situationally. I mean, you get a team to 15 third down attempts, you're obviously doing something pretty decent on first and second down, but you have to look at the numbers to see where those third down attempts are. Are they third and shorts or third and mediums, third and longs, things like that. So those things I would look for as a coach if I'm looking at how can we, be better on the run defense part. And just execute. Just execute the call. Even with the McCullough, like while we're talking about the same play, even with the McCullough call, he gets up the field. I understand that. But we're in an under front to the boundary. Our D tackle's in the B gap. The ball get ran through the B gap. That's something, would pull my hair out as a coach. And I have a fade. So that's those are the type of things that they got to clean up. Eliminate the big run. I mean, and don't allow the explosives.
Kind of going on to Minnesota, Nebraska's next opponent that they play tomorrow. You've done your film breakdown on Twitter. Can you give us a little bit on what you see in Minnesota's quarterback and how his passing might be a little bit different than Malik Washington, what they've seen from quarterbacks that they faced so far?
Yes, I think this is the first time this year they don't have a mobile quarterback, so I think that helps them. Um, Not saying he's going to stand at one point, in the pocket. I think they're going to do some bootlegs and probably sprint outs, things like that. But he is not a running quarterback, right? Not at no point at all, right? So I think that works well for them, right? They can get to more less hybrid blitz packages on third down, right? So we don't have to have McCullough like spying like they did with Malik over the center and things like that. So we can kind of free him up. But I think Lindsey is a solid quarterback. Like I said in my Twitter breakdown, I think he's only completing 60% of his passes, but looking at the Rutgers, Purdue, and Cal, I think he's done a good job putting the ball where his receivers can get it. I don't know if his receivers are necessarily definitely not the best core I think we've seen, right? I don't think they do well separating and getting away from man coverage. But they're still quality guys, right? It's a Big Ten. Um, but I think Lindsey, he's a good game manager. I mean, I think he's gonna put the ball in harm's way too often, right? He can make just about every throw, right? But may not have the velocity of some of the guys we've seen with Washington and Childs and some other people. So um, I think he'll provide a decent challenge, right? But I think him being stationary will help them be able to put more pressure on them than I think they did last week with Washington.
So speaking of getting pressure on Lindsey, that interior of that Minnesota offensive line has given them some troubles over the course of the season. Is there, I know we saw early in the season Nebraska was kind of running a lot of stunts. It seemed like they were doing a little bit less of that the last couple of games. Is there something you'd like to see them do on their defensive line to try and take advantage of that? Or is it really just, hey, you got to beat the guy in front of you?
Yeah, from what I saw, I mean, they were getting a lot more stunts on third down, but I just think, man, straight up, they're just they're not the physical Minnesota unit you're used to. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Up front, right? And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Husker fans hope we're not looking at this as a brand game and what Minnesota's history with us has been. This isn't the same type of team, I definitely see a lot of things on the interior, like you said, that could be a problem, for them and something. Um, Also outside on the edge too. I think your right tackle, there's just some struggles there. He's been getting up quite a bit of pressure too in the games I've looked at. So um, I think third down you can always work games. I mean, you're going to get protections that you can take advantage of. But I say first and second down, if we can, run, let's stay good extension and play good gap sound football. Like I said, wreak havoc, get across the guy's face, and make tackles at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield.
MRI, when you're, I've had this thought a couple times when you're talking about like defensive linemen making plays and things like that and getting off blocks. How much of that is just like, and this might be a very dumb question, but I don't know the answer, so I'm going to ask anyway. How much of defensive linemen getting off blocks and making plays and making those stops at kind of 1 to 2 yards like you're talking about, how much of that is coachable versus just has to be an individual effort thing for a defensive lineman? Because I don't I think when we talk about that, I was like, oh, well, he's got to make a play or he's got to get off the block. Like, I don't think we always know what all that entails.
Well, it's a lot of it's a lot of technique. I think the biggest thing, especially with me working with D linemen a lot more in the last 3 years, a lot of guys are just coached like it's a power thing. Like you gotta want it more, or you just gotta be stronger than the other guy, right? Um, but there's a lot of things that go into, the hip power, the hip explosiveness, being able to get extension from the elbows, um, locking out, being able to find up. It's a lot of small things that go into that, half a second fight, right? Once the ball snapped, they're pretty much in a brawl once it goes. So um a lot of that, I think, is some of his skill set, some of it's mentality, just a relentless attitude. Like, hey, I refuse to be blocked. But a lot of it too is technique. Like, you got to get you see how tight these jerseys are on offensive linemen. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, these guys. You see these guys in the locker room before games. They need 2 or 3 guys to put their jersey on and take it off. Like, it ain't easy grabbing that cloth, right?
Yeah.
And trying to get your hands consistently there. So it takes a lot. It's a lot of reps, right? And that's why I love training D line. Just because I mean, there's a lot of minute things that go into it, and kind of change the mindset of hey, it's not just a power thing, or you got to want it more. Just kind of these old coaching cliches you just tell guys and just throw them up front because they're big. Well, there's a skill set there that's needed, but also a mentality that's needed as well to be relentless about hey, I refuse to be blocked, right? And I'm not gonna wait for someone to call holding, right? I'm gonna work for that, meaning relentless with my effort and relentless with my hands and being physical. So there is a lot that goes into it. Obviously, assignment and plays into that. I mean, what's my job on the play? But at the end of the day, right, you got to be a physical guy. You got to be one. You got to be willing to put your hands on another man and move him to get where you want to go. So that's the biggest thing you want to see out of D linemen, especially out of this young front. Just keep seeing that aggressiveness with their hands, aggressiveness with their hips, and keep building confidence and stopping the run.
Now, keeping on the mentality shift and speaking on that is for the defense, for the linebackers and the defensive line and everything. What kind of mentality shift might there be for facing a more stationary quarterback as opposed to one that's going to want to get out of the pocket and create with his legs? How do you go about attacking somebody who wants to stay in the pocket and pick you apart with his arm?
Interior pressure is going to be important. That's why you can't eliminate the stunts and stuff because you want to still be able to work Design and Williams, up under the middle, under those stunts and things like that. Those are two kind of chess pieces a little bit. Um, so interior pressure will be important. If they can get that from Judy and some other guys on the inside, that'd be great as well. And so it's not have to be always manufactured. But then also, I think as an edge guy, your whole move arsenal is open, right? When you got a guy that's scrambling, you're kind of thinking, I'm control rushing, meaning I'm probably going to use a lot more speed to power, right? Because I want to make sure I control my guard, control my tackle, and eliminate scrimmage gaps, right? Which would be the B gap, right? So and keep him in the pocket and outside. So when you got a guy that's stationary right now, you can use a little bit more of your finesse moves, right? You can work your edge moves because right, he's going to be staying, at least 5 to 7 yards back behind the center. So kind of changes your mentality a little bit. I mean, you can get off the ball a little bit faster, less worried about where he's at in the pocket as you're rushing. So you can kind of just figure out what's my path, what's my plan, and run it. So hope to see those guys kind of put their hand in the dirt and just get off the ball and go. That'd be the best thing for them. Let the secondary cover up the receivers. Like I said, I think again are a decent core, but I don't think they're the best we've seen.
Michael, with the way that Nebraska likes to play man coverage, I know they threw a little bit more zone out last week than they had for most
Yeah.
against Maryland. You think with that lack of mobility at quarterback, then they will, and like you mentioned with the receivers that kind of struggle to get open, you think that we'll see them go back primarily to that physical man-to-man we saw earlier in the year?
Yeah, I expect to see them blitz 5-man pressures, probably uptick that more this week. Less cover three. That was the most cover three I've seen, at least from the film. From the tail. I don't have the full 22, but
Yeah.
just kind of seeing the structure beforehand and seeing the corners, how they get out there, things like that. You kind of tell a little bit. Um, that's the most cover three I've seen them run all year. And a lot of it was stemming from their cover two, look, which makes sense. Again, a young quarterback trying to disguise coverage, easy shell with the 3 high to roll to cover three and roll to cover two and those things. But yeah, definitely, I would expect to see an uptick of 5-man pressures this week. A little more man coverage. Just and try to get after him. I think be aggressive. Again, I think there's been pressure allowed by the offensive line. I think that's when you can take advantage of it.
That's our guy, Michael Rose-Ivey, former Husker. Michael, we appreciate the time as always. Great stuff. And real quick before you go, how do you think this game goes for Nebraska?
Well, last week I wanted to say it was going to be a double-digit win, but I was proven wrong. So I'll be modest and say we'll beat the spread at least.
Hey, you take away those 3 picks, that's a double-digit win pretty easy. I don't think we were as far off as maybe we thought.
Nah, we weren't too far off. It'll be a good game, but again, it's another game that you will hope to see them take that next step, and it'll be a big red away game again in about a fourth quarter, and we're up a couple points and get some of our young guys some experience on the road.
There we go, Michael. Appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the game.
Yes, sir. Go Big Reds.
That is Michael Rose-Ivey, former Husker and high school coach down there in Missouri. Great stuff from him. You could tell he kind of wanted to say he thinks they might kick Minnesota's ass a little bit.